Rich, you
There you
figured it
are.
out. Because I couldn't figure it out.
I don't know. I don't know if it worked or not. I think when
Okay.
you first log on, oh, there you are. I
Okay.
think when you first log on, there's a little button that says you can invite people.
Man,
So I don't know.
listen. TikTok is confusing, okay? All I know is I can see the comments now that you're on live. It's like darker at the bottom, so you can start seeing the comments more clear. Can you see them?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. So what we have here? Have you ever used
I don't.
CMOS Fast or Dr. Sebi? I do use
Ooh.
CMOS. I love CMOS. Um, Dr. Sebi only. I feel like Dr. Sebi has the cure if and only if you dedicated to an alkaline vegan life in his regimen for the rest of your life and never want to stray away from his advice. Then yes, he has it for you. He'll put your virus to sleep and you wouldn't have to deal with an outbreak. But the minute you want to
Yeah.
revert back to regular life, your herpes will come back.
Yeah. It's not. It's not really a cure. What they're just using. You're just changing your diet and just giving your immune system what it needs.
Yeah.
The funny thing, if you look into the trial, there's a lot of people that will post things about Dr. Sebi,
Mm-hmm.
and there was supposed to be like a whole bunch of people that showed up and they said, "Oh my God, I was cured," and blah blah blah. Well, Dr. Sebi wasn't really a doctor; he was an engineer, and he started on his journey of using herbs and making these false claims. And if you look at the court documents, no one showed up. So his claims that he cured people was just kind of BS, and now people have kind of run with it.
Yeah.
But if you do change your diet and you start eating healthy, you will see a reduction.
Yes.
So it's not a cure, but I've taken herbs, I've changed my diet, and it completely made me feel so much better.
Yes.
So yeah, you can totally do that.
I want to put it out there that a false, well, not me, not even say false, a negative on a blood test does not always mean that you're cured from herpes. Make sure
Yep.
y'all know that. um,
Yeah, you don't just test positive and then one day, oh, I must be negative.
it's
It's a nice thought.
a nice
It,
thought.
I would, yeah, that would be awesome. But your antibody response doesn't really work that way.
Yeah.
It's so crazy too because we were just talking about this the other day.
Mm-hmm.
A person had been diagnosed. She went to the doctor and she saw a herpes blister, and she kind of knew what it was, but she wasn't sure. So she went to the doctor, and the doctor looked at it and said, "Yes, that's herpes." And then they had the blood test, and it came back positive, but it was a very low positive. And then she says, "Oh my God, maybe it's not," because you start thinking in your head like because you don't want to have it, so you start thinking of excuses and you start applying that to yourself. And I know I did when I got first diagnosed. I was like, "Oh, this isn't herpes. It can't be," and then it turns out it is. So she went and got retested and she tested negative. So she was like, "Oh my God, I don't understand. I thought I was negative and now I don't have it." I was like, "Well, I kind of feel bad to tell you this because I know you were really looking forward to that, and I'm sorry for this. But what happens is that your antibody levels will fluctuate during your lifetime and during when you're having infections and when you're not having infections. And the current testing method is so bad at determining the right level unless you test very high. Some people who are positive will test negative. So until the new testing method comes out, it's really just a guessing game. It kind of sucks.
I've
And I,
tested
I felt,
negative before.
yeah,
Okay,
crazy, right?
and I have herpes, and I know for sure that I have herpes. So I just want to let y'all know that when you test a negative on a blood test doesn't always mean that you are cured or your herpes just automatically disappeared. Um, I do have a question for you, Rich. I have a friend who is asymptomatic, or she thinks she is asymptomatic because she just found out she had herpes via blood test, and her
Yeah.
number was at 3.14.
Yep.
I'm like, how do you never experience an outbreak and your number be so high?
Yeah. So what happens is that it really has to herpes. Herpes simplex has to do with immunotolerance. And what that means is that it has to do with how your body responds to the virus, what your immune response is. And when you think about it, most people who are exposed to the virus never see any signs or symptoms. They never, they very rarely get an outbreak. They have no idea. And if they do get an outbreak and they look down and they see a pimple, oh, it must be an ingrown hair, and they move on with their life.
Yeah.
So when you test high like that, the science behind it is that they seem to think that because you have a very good immune response to the virus, you have a high level of antibodies and it is keeping the virus at bay. And you are now in the largest percentage of people who have herpes, which is 5 to 6 billion people.
Yeah.
So you can test positive on that's an absolute positive.
Yeah, that's
Anything over 3 point, yeah. Anything over 3.0 is pretty fucking high. So you have
I was looking like you got herpes for sure. You got more herpes than me. No.
right. It turns into a contest. Who has more herpes?
You got the higher count.
And I had a yep.
No,
That's a contest that nobody wins.
nobody.
A friend, another Facebook friend of mine, she tested 58.7, I think. And she was like, "Oh my God, what does this mean? Am I gonna die?" And I'm like, "Just no. You're gonna be fine. Just breathe with me." It says, and she didn't know what that meant. And basically, all that is that it's the amount of antibodies that were present at the time that the blood serum was taken. That's it.
Yeah.
So for whatever reason, maybe it was active in her system, and her immune system was superimposed and it was fighting the virus and keeping it at bay, or maybe that's just her naturally high number.
Yeah.
So it's
I want to
crazy.
I want to put it out there that no STD is going to kill you if you know about it. If you're aware of the STD, no STD is going to kill you. You are not going to die. But if you're not getting tested, if you don't know what's going on with your body, if you're unaware, then yes, an STD can be extremely harmful for you. Some STDs can go in your reproductive system. Some STDs can kill you without knowing. Chlamydia doesn't always have symptoms, you guys. You're not always going to have a bad smell, or your discharge is not always going to change when you have an STD. So go get tested. It's important to know. It's the not knowing that kills you. It's never the knowing that kills you.
Absolutely.
Make sure I throw that out there.
No, that's great. I think one of your followers had said something about bacterial vaginosis.
Okay.
I didn't. I saw it briefly for a second, and the interesting thing is, I was actually having a conversation with a friend of mine, Dr. Ina, and she works for the CDC, and we were talking about herpes manifesting itself in different ways, like the paper cut, the knife cut type of herpes. Women are seeing like, it was like, oh, I don't know where that paper cut came from, and why is it there? Well, it's herpes. It's called linear erosive herpes, and it's just a different form of how herpes is showing up through that nerve line. It's just very different. And the interesting thing about bacterial vaginosis is, even though it could be caused by many other things, your flora is off. The vagina is naturally acidic, which is why women have to buy so many pairs of underwear, because it will actually bleach it.
Yes.
And I'm not telling you anything you don't already know, but your natural flora in your vagina is going to find that natural stasis. And if something is happening or taking place that is viral or bacterial, it can throw that flora off, which causes bacterial vaginosis. And a lot of women who end up getting genital herpes, they're like, I don't know why I keep getting bacterial vaginosis. I don't know what's going on. Well, part of the reason they seem to think that there's a direct correlation is that you're experiencing an outbreak. And when that virus is present, your immune system is super active, and that balance has already been thrown off, which is allowing bacteria to thrive. So now you're stuck with the conundrum of having both bacterial vaginosis and a herpes infection.
Which is why it's
And
so
that's
important to learn your bodies, ladies. You guys would complain, oh, I'm getting back to back BV or I'm getting back to back outbreaks. But did you ever take the time to say, let me start journaling the things that I'm doing? Let me start journaling the foods that I'm eating so I can make a better correlation as to what is really triggering these things. There are ways that you can change your lifestyle and your diet to prevent BV, to prevent back to back outbreaks. Sometimes a lot of women say that their periods trigger outbreaks. I thought the same thing until I learned my body. And what I learned was every time I was hormonal a week before my period, I would eat the same foods, highly processed, high in sugars, high in arginine. All three of those things can trigger an outbreak. I'm eating these
yep.
foods. I'm looking back at my journal notes every single month, like clockwork. I'm eating the same thing a week before my periods. I was triggering my own outbreaks before my period. So then I thought that my periods was triggering an outbreak when that wasn't true. It was me. Once I was able to learn that about myself, I changed those habits. And guess what? I'm not having outbreaks during the period anymore. So
That's a great idea.
it's important to
It
learn
really
your body.
is. It 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 is a great idea. I told a female friend of mine, she said the same thing, and I was like, well, you can just get like a notepad, go to Walmart, get yourself a notepad, and just write down what you're eating. And she's like, well, then what do I do? I says, well, what you can do after that is just look at the food, and you can literally Google how much arginine is in chicken,
Yes.
how much lysine is in chicken, and you can actually compare the two. And as long as your levels of lysine are a little bit higher, you will see, most people will see a reduction in symptoms. It's not really about eliminating everything that has arginine. You still need arginine.
Yes.
They have found out through studies on lysine that even though arginine does aggravate the situation and lysine is more of an inhibitor towards herpes, you still kind of need both to survive.
Yes.
But what you're really trying to do in that diet is just make your levels of lysine much higher.
Yes.
You can still eat some foods, but like you said, you write them down and now you become a scientist
Yes.
and now you are experimenting on yourself.
Yes.
And then you can literally see, like, oh my God, I had a candy bar yesterday and I wasn't thinking, and now it's 20 hours later and I'm feeling a little off.
Yeah.
Well, it was the candy bar.
Yeah. And it's necessary because we go to our doctor's office and expect to tell our doctor, hey, my leg is hurting, and the doctor to know exactly why your leg is hurting. The doctor is taking a guess as to why
Yep,
your leg is hurting. 12 years is not going to teach them everything they need to know about everything. They just know how to get to it, to figure it out. If you go on this journey with self, there's this app called the Cara app. It literally records everything from you, from the consistency and the smells of your discharge to the consistencies and the smells of your stool, everything, and your food. And it would
wow,
start to get the data for you. That's what it did for me. I started
no
pinpointing
kidding.
when I ate this, I was stressed out. When every time I eat this, I'm happy. You'll start learning what food and your activities and everything is doing for you in that one app. With the app,
That's really cool.
yes, it's super cool. It's super cool. So when something is failing in your body or something's off in your body, you're able to communicate that with your doctor better. I have nerve pain. That's one of my prodrome symptoms. It's on my right leg, from my toe all the way up to my thigh. My leg just, I can't
Oof.
move it. It's horrible.
Mm.
I never knew where that came from. It just started happening in my life. I didn't put it with my herpes until I started journaling. I'm like, damn, this always happens right before an outbreak.
Yep.
Always happens right before an outbreak. I'm looking up prodrome symptoms. Oh, there it is. This is a prodrome symptom. Now I know that every time I have nerve pain, I need to watch my diet because I don't want to trigger an outbreak. I know that an outbreak is
Yeah.
coming, so I'm going to do everything to stop it. I'm about to boost my immune system. I'm about to avoid certain foods for right now because I don't want to, make welcome my outbreak. I'm trying to push it back. I'm doing everything I
Yeah.
need to do to prevent that outbreak. But I wouldn't have been able to make that correlation without going on that journey with myself without taking the time to learn my body. With doing this, I'm able to communicate with my doctor better. Hey, doc, I've been doing this and this and this and this and that. The only thing that's changed is that I ate this and I did this. Could you tell me what's wrong? You can help the doctor better.
Yeah.
They can go exactly where they need to go to figure out what is wrong with you instead of playing the guessing game.
Yep. Well, that's the biggest problem too, is that most doctors don't really understand herpes. And the more that you can give them, hopefully your doctor will have a better understanding of herpes, because most general practitioners don't. When I speak with doctors who have been to medical school, and they literally say, yeah, we spent about, in the scheme of things, if you look at how many years a person goes to medical school, they spend only 10 minutes on herpes simplex. And the reason is because in the medical community, herpes simplex is seen as an innocuous virus. It's not a big deal. But when you start seeing patients that come in once in a while with issues, they just give you a pill and they send you on your way. What they're not really understanding is the scope and the biology and behavior of the virus, and the new research that is showing it's really not an innocuous virus. Although for most people, it's going to seem that way. But you talk to millions, maybe even perhaps a billion people who get a cold sore every once in a while. It may even be seen as innocuous to them, but when you start getting lower and lower into the percentage of people who actually experience outbreaks, like severe outbreaks, you're talking 300 million people. If you were really to get all of those people to start speaking up, people would be like, holy crap, what is happening right now? And it's because nobody really talks about it. And the medical community, we have a nonprofit that I'm working on with Diane Abbott, and you know Diane Abbott because I introduced you guys to each other on that one, and working on a few ideas to help the medical community get more acquainted with the in-depth biology and behavior, so that when the new generation of physicians that come out there will either be aware of the vaccine at that time, or they will have a better understanding on how to talk to patients, because you know as well as I do, last time I went to the doctor and got diagnosed, he was like, yeah, you got herpes. Here you go. Here's the prescription. See you later. And I'm sitting there and I'm,
Oh man, we kind of lost Rich for a little bit.
oh,
Oh, there we go.
I was like, excuse me, I have more questions. Why are you leaving?
Yeah,
And the
same
doctor's
thing.
already gone.
No, my
Yeah.
doctor. You ain't got nothing to worry about. Just don't have sex during an outbreak. What? What is an
Yeah.
outbreak? What does that mean? What is going on? Like the doctors give you nothing. It's a little
Yep.
bit sad. I understand it now that I'm learning more about herpes, but then I was a little bit upset with it. Why wouldn't the doctor tell me anything? Why wouldn't they give me more information? Even
Yep.
when I was pregnant, they didn't explain much to me. They were just like, "We're gonna put you on this medication when you're 7 months pregnant, all the way up to your term, and then we're gonna examine the birth canal
Yep.
to see if you're able to have the baby." Okay, and I'm just
Yeah.
out. All right, still not knowing anything about herpes. I go to Google, and the only thing I find is what is it? Neonatal herpes. My baby's gonna die, and I'm like freaking out.
Yeah. Yeah. It really does kind of suck, because there's no distinguishing information, right? So you go from I'm a mom and I have herpes to holy crap, this is killing babies. So there's such a huge lack of information as to making it clear
Yeah.
that yes, it does happen, and yes, it can happen. There are very low occurrences of this taking place, but there's always a miscommunication with the doctor, and doctors don't test for it. My friend Brianna, who I think was just on here, she lost her baby to herpes. It killed her son, and she was never tested. And she's still pissed off, and I don't blame her for being pissed off. I would be pissed off too.
Yeah.
The father of the kid, like, why didn't you test? Why didn't you at least look?
Yeah.
And the doctor was like, well, the testing methods aren't really that great, which is true,
Yeah.
but it's all you have right now. So as a minimum, it should have been done.
You would think it should be required once a woman finds out she's pregnant, just because of that chance of the baby passing away
Yep.
if she didn't know, and that's not
Yeah.
the case, and that's sad to me. I understand them not wanting to test all the time on your, regular
Right.
STD panel, but if a woman is pregnant, she should be tested to see if she has herpes. Point blank, period. I don't understand
Yeah.
that. And it goes, I heard you say the child's father, maybe he should have checked, but
Well, he was tested too.
huh?
He they both carry herpes
Okay.
and they both didn't know it.
Wow.
Had no idea. And I remember when we first started talking and I was like, "Yeah." I says, "Believe it or not, you are in that largest percentage of the population of people who are doing just fine, you know. They just had no idea."
Let's talk about this. Makes me think about the failed marriages. People who find out they have herpes while they're married and then they divorce because they are just dead set on the person they were with gave them herpes. That's a lot of things. A lot of us do that within the community. We automatically
Yep.
blame the person we're sleeping with currently for our herpes.
It's a shame. It's a shame too because the facts don't always dictate what happens in reality. So you have people who are positive. They've either never been tested or they've never had an outbreak and they had no clue whatsoever. And then one day, for whatever reason, that person's immunotolerance becomes compromised. Let's say the female gets pregnant. She gets pregnant. She goes through a lot of stress. That stress puts a lot of problems on the immune system. The immune system becomes stressed, which allows the virus to emerge. So now she's like, how the hell did I get herpes? And she's automatically looking at her husband going, you son of a bitch. Meanwhile, they could both have it and just had no idea. He may have gotten it when he was a teenager,
Yeah.
or she may have gotten it when she was a teenager. And now all of this fighting, and because of all the bad information that's online, they're pointing the finger at each other. They end up getting divorced. Now she's living in squalor and trying to raise a child, and he's pissed off,
Yeah.
and their relationship is completely destroyed
That part.
just over that. And they just didn't understand, or the doctor didn't explain, that this is something that happens. It's a huge disconnect with people, which is one of the things that really irks me.
The irking part for me is the not the lack of misinformation or educate the lack of education, but it's the let me be a victim
Yeah.
mindset. People search for they want to blame or point the finger so that they don't have to shine light on themselves. And the fact is,
Yep.
did you even know that you had herpes? You know, and
Yep. They had no idea.
my favorite question is how do you know that you have herpes? What did you look for on your test results to know if you have herpes or not? Especially if you're having the blood test, it's not going to tell you herpes positive, and it's not going to tell you herpes negative. So the minute somebody tells me, "Oh, it said I was herpes negative on the test results when I got my blood results back," I'm like, "Okay, so you don't know if you have herpes or not." Let's just focus
Right.
on that part. Let's stop trying to. He gave me or she gave me herpes because that's the person I was sleeping with. And I didn't have anything because my doctor said I was good. No, let's not do that. You just didn't know that you had herpes or not. You didn't know, and you had sex.
Yeah.
And it's as easily
It's
for
crazy.
that person to just not know, and they had sex with you too. Um, a lot of people within the community, they always blame someone else. They willingly gave me herpes, and then they scream how they're afraid to disclose. I'm like, well, do you ever think about the person that you were putting the finger at that gave you herpes? Maybe they was afraid to disclose, just like you are afraid to disclose right now too. Um, we have to get out
Isn't
of
it
that.
interesting how it's interesting how when you are in whatever kind of pain that you are in, you completely have blinders on and you lose perspective at what actually took place.
Yeah, yeah. It's so easy to see everyone else is wrong or point the blame on everyone else, but the minute it's time to point the finger this way, it's like, No, not me. It's not my fault. Someone should have told me. I'm like, you're putting your
Yep.
sex health. You're putting the responsibility for your own sex health on someone else instead of yourself. Let's not just talk about herpes. Let's talk about consenting to having unprotected sex. Period. I don't think STD contraction laws are fair because you're putting a set of laws on a community of people who can't help the fact that they can't get rid of their STDs to have the necessary conversation that everyone should be having. Why is it that
Right.
if me and you gonna have sex, Rich, and we decide to consent to have sex and we don't talk about STDs and I don't ask you to see your test results, right? But say if you had HIV and I don't have HIV,
Mm.
I get HIV now. You can get sentenced to death or life in prison because you didn't tell me. But me and
Right.
you decided to have sex, and decided not to have that necessary conversation. I don't think that's fair. I think.
There's a line of ignorance there, right? So what do they call ignorance of the law? But I think, see, in the case, see, now what if, as the example that you just posed,
Yeah.
as the example of me having HIV, not that I have it, but let's just say that I do,
Yeah.
and we had sex, is the example the fact that I knew that I had it and had sex with you anyway, or the fact that I didn't know I had it?
No, you knew. Now.
Okay, so as the example, let's say I knew I had it,
Hmm.
I willingly had unprotected sex with you. Yeah, see that would be on me
Yeah.
as the example for the law.
For the law. For the law, it's on you. But
But the responsibility for you not to ask.
I don't get penalized. I made the
Right.
same decision as you did, and yet you're the only one that's gonna get punished for making the
But you
same
didn't
decision.
ask.
You know? I
Right.
feel like when you consent to sex, you consent to everything that comes with sex. So if you're not requiring to see STD results, you're not using protection, you're not doing anything to prevent that in your life, it's not
Yep.
fair to put that weight on the other person. Me, as the person in this situation who doesn't have as an STD, right? I'm
Yeah.
assuming that you don't have an STD because you didn't tell me that. Why
Right.
can't you assume that I have HIV and I just don't want to talk about it, just like you have HIV and you don't want to talk about it? You can make that assumption.
Right.
But because of the
Yeah.
laws, it's kind of like, I just think the laws are unfair. I think if you get rid of the STD contraction laws, it puts the responsibility on everyone to have the conversations we should already be having in the first place, instead of the
Well, it's
responsibility on one group of people.
right. There has to be some sort of culpability on both parties for asking or not asking. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
I think it would be. I think it's definitely. I mean, HIV now, when you look at it, is not a death sentence,
No, it's not.
and you could even date somebody with HIV as long as their levels are below a certain thing, and you won't get it,
Mm-hmm.
which is great. I think that's fantastic. I've never been in the position to date somebody with that, but if they were low enough and it was no risk, then yeah, I mean, like, who cares?
Yeah.
I think she would be at more risk for having the possibility of getting herpes from being with somebody for, I think, the last study, or one of the three studies that I read, that the longer you are with somebody, the chances of that person contracting it are much higher. And it's very interesting to me that I always hear people say, "Oh, well, I've had several boyfriends and I never gave it to them," and it's like, really?
How do you
How do
know?
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah,
How do you know?
you really don't.
Don't know. I found out I had herpes in a 3-year relationship with my child's father. Of course, natural instincts, I blamed him at first. Like, he gave me herpes. I know he gave me herpes. And he told me he didn't have herpes. I never seen his test results, guys. I don't know if he has herpes or not. I'm not 100% sure if he has herpes or not. All I know is what this man tells me. And he can possibly have herpes, or he can not have. He can be telling me the truth and not have herpes. But I can't blame him for my herpes. Point blank, period. I had sex with this man without knowing for sure.
Yep.
Number one, okay, I didn't require it. I didn't require that. Two, I didn't know herpes wasn't included in your average STD panel. I didn't know that. You know how many people I had sex with before him without knowing that information? And it was enough for my
Yep.
doctor to tell me that I was good for me to walk out of her office and not question anything else. I didn't say, "Hey doc, can you show me my results? What are you actually testing me for?" If I would have did that, I would have known she hasn't been testing me for herpes. So
Yep.
even though I was with my child's father when I found out I had herpes, I could have easily had herpes way before him. So no, I
Yeah.
don't blame him.
Yeah. It's great. It's crazy too that there's so much of a disconnect when I ended up getting a new physician
Mm-hmm.
for other issues. Just you should always have a physician on hand, and I had to pick a new doctor, and they weren't available, so I ended up getting this woman doctor. She had been a doctor for a long time, and she completely credible.
Mm-hmm.
She knew her stuff, and she was actually pretty good. And the second or third time that I went for a follow up, she looks at my chart and she's like, "Oh, oh, it looks like you've been exposed to herpes." And I just started laughing because I've known it since I was 19 years old. And she's like, "Oh, well, it's not a big deal. It just means you're exposed. It doesn't mean you have it." And I looked at her and I was like, "Excuse me?" And she's like, "No, no, no. It just means you're exposed." I'm like, "No, no, doc. Exposure means that you have it. Who told you that?" And then she was like, "Oh, wow, blah, 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 blah." And she just moved on very quickly. So I don't know if she was just making that statement to kind of make me feel better, because some doctors will kind of placate the factual information, which is, I don't think is a good thing to do with your patient.
Yeah.
But I understood what she was going with, but I was like, "No, no, 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 no. Exposure means you have it, my dear."
Yeah. Doctors,
you really said that to the wrong guy. Hold on a
the
second.
wrong person. you know, Doctors know that the herpes stigma does more damage emotionally than the virus does physically. And they try to prepare you for that.
Sure.
Even with how they may suggest that you don't take the herpes test. Well, you're not showing any symptoms. Doesn't make sense for you to get tested for herpes, or the blood
Yep.
test might be inaccurate. Why would you want to know anyway? Everyone has herpes. You'll be fine. Doctors are going to give you a lot of juggle when you go to ask for herpes. Your way around that is just telling them you've been exposed to herpes. Hey, my partner said they have herpes. I want to test for herpes. That's how you can just stop your doctor from trying to convince you not to get the test in the first place. We got a
Yeah.
lot of questions.
Oh, somebody had. Do you see that one? Why doctors just make it seem like it's okay?
Well, I mean, herpes for one is the least dangerous STI that you can ever get. It's like the bottom of all STDs. It's the least dangerous. It's not harmful. Everyone has it. It's like your common cold. The most it does to you is an outbreak and maybe some nerve pain. But it's I feel like you're not gonna die if you have herpes or not. So I don't think doctors are gonna stress themselves out over herpes like they will chlamydia or gonorrhea or trich
Right.
or syphilis. Things that can actually cause harm to your life.
Right. Oh, somebody said, how about comparing it to COVID? Same concepts. Well, kind of. So, COVID-19, which is SARS-CoV-2, is uh, a type of coronavirus, very similar to the flu, in that family of cold and flu viruses. However, obviously, that particular type is extremely um, virulent, and infectious. And it's also shown to be killing a lot of people. But if you pull out the conversation of death and you just look at it from the term being used as asymptomatic, it is kind of similar. So people who aren't dying from COVID are still asymptomatic, but they're still spreading it. So it's kind of similar. We're talking about two very different viruses. COVID-19 is just new. Herpes simplex is millions of years old. But if you're talking about the term asymptomatic, that term has a lot of similarities, because there are people walking around with COVID and spreading it to grandma and killing grandma. But the same thing without the death overtone. With herpes simplex, people are passing it back and forth all of the time, constantly. People kissing each other hello, sharing utensils, having sex. It's constantly being passed every single day.
Smoking blunts,
But
guys. I know y'all been in ciphers with a bunch of people in your ciphers, and then you're gonna pop up in a relationship, have some herpes, and blame the person that you with when you just smoked a blunt with 15 different people the other day. I'm just saying, like, people don't understand. Can you explain to everyone the difference between type 1 and type 2?
Well, they have more similarities than differences.
Mm-hmm.
Type 1, in a petri dish, if you're going to measure it, type 1 replicates very quickly, 18 to 20 hours. Type 2 takes a little bit slower. Both of them share about 85% of the same genome structure. They have the same reproductive cycle. They have the same biology. They have the same behavior, so to speak. If you were to look at both of these viruses in a petri dish, they would look exactly the same. Interestingly enough, people tend to think that type 1 prefers the mouth and type 2 prefers the genitals. However, when we look at these two viruses and you look at their behavior and their method of infection, they are both looking for epithelial cells. That's all they look for. And there has been the old idiom of saying that type 2 prefers the genitals and you can't get type 2 anywhere else. That's bullshit. Both viruses are looking for epithelial cells. If you look at your skin, the outer layer of your skin is dead. And it is a protective layer against bacteria, viruses, and other antigens. But if there's a cut or a scratch that opens up that outer layer of your epidermis, those are epithelial cells. The mouth, the inside of your nose, your eyes, the vagina, the vulva, the anus, the urethra, the penis, all of those areas offer direct contact with mucosal epithelium, which is direct contact with epithelial cells. And if that virus makes its way there, it will get into those cells, it will replicate, it will make its way into the nervous system, and it will find the nearest ganglion, and it will create a latent infection, and it will hang out there for the rest of your life. Now, the idiom of saying that type 2 prefers the genitals is really a misunderstanding. Now, type 2 has adapted the ability over millions of years to infect stronger and faster than type 1 can. So if you look at type 1 over the past, let's go back to our common ancestors before Australopithecus, our common ancestors of chimpanzees, which is about 1.5 million to 3 million years ago. The common ancestor of type 1 and type 2 were combined at that point, because type 1 was in the human family tree for 6 million years or so. Type 2 was in chimpanzees. So when we have our common ancestor, the two viruses combined and have used the last 1.5 million to 3 million years to evolutionarily change and adapt to infecting humans to the way they are today. And because of the competition between viruses, type 2 has adapted the ability to infect epithelial cells in the genital region quicker, harder, and faster than type 1 can. And the reason for this competition is because type 1 has been around for a very long time. And most of us will be exposed to type 1 first as children. So when viruses are competing, especially viruses that are very similar towards one another, they have to adapt to change. Darwin comes into play hugely here. And type 2 had to make some changes. Otherwise, it was not going to be able to infect efficiently in somebody who is already exposed to a virus that shares most of the same gene structure. And that's what has happened. Now, you speak to someone like myself who gets type 2 on their face and cranial and in their eye, and you notice that doctors who see patients who get type 1, or they think it's type 1, and they never swab it and they never test it, it's just assumed it's type 1, which is a huge misconception. Because if you talk to scientists and you talk to people who are actually looking at the data, these two viruses can infect anywhere.
Yeah.
So as far as the differences are concerned, yeah, there's some differences, sure. But there's also, you have type 1 that has, type 1 has several different strains that follow underneath that are related. Still type 1, but they're different variants.
Mm-hmm.
Type 2 has several different strains, and few of these are antiviral resistant. Even type 1 has a few strains that are extremely aggressive, even more so than type 2. So you'll see cases of people who are like, oh my God, I got type 1 and it's genital and it flares up all the time and I don't understand why. Well, it's not only an immunotolerance issue, but it could also be that you picked up a very virulent strain that happens to be extremely aggressive or antiviral resistant. It's just that to diagnose something like that would cost thousands and thousands of dollars. You'd have to be in a laboratory, trial setting to even get to that determination. And they don't even really talk about it because at the end of the day, you know what symptoms you have, you have herpes, and you're suffering. So sometimes giving that information doesn't really give any relief to people.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just information. That's really all it is. So as far as the difference, that's pretty much where you're at.
Yes. I think my favorite type of people within the community right now are my HSV1 genital herpes people, because I'm able to shut up all my lip herpes people who think that cold sores are not herpes with the growing. It's amazing how I didn't know how many women alone suffered with genital herpes type 1. When I found out I had herpes, I thought the same thing everyone else thinks. HSV2 is below the belt. HSV1 is above the belt. But growing this community and talking to so many people, I'm like, oh, that is not true. That's not true at all. There's so many people who have HSV2 above and so many people who have HSV1 below. I heard
Yep.
someone in the comments say, I've never had an outbreak. Now, I know there's only a small percentage of us with herpes that actually experience outbreaks. Most people are asymptomatic. But I also want to let y'all know that herpes does not just show up on your lips and your genitals. There's so many different places herpes can show up. So you probably are experiencing the outbreak, but never thought this bump in my underarm might be herpes, or my sore throat. I keep getting strep throat every few months and I don't know why I
Yep.
keep getting strep throat. Well, they're swabbing your throat for
Tonsillitis.
strep, they're not swabbing your throat for herpes. Or
Tonsillitis.
you might have it near your
People.
cervix, inside of your vagina. And you're like, oh my God, I keep getting BV, or I keep having a yeast infection. I don't know. But you might be having outside outbreaks inside of your vagina. You can have it on your
Yep.
fingers, herpetic whitlow. You can have it in your eye. You can have it in your nose. You can have it in your face, like Rich said. You can have it inside of your
Yeah.
mouth. Herpes is not just a lip and genital thing. So just because you
It's just, yeah. The commonality has taken preference over the conversation, and that narrative has been that way for a very long time. Like, even somebody just commented, is it normal for outbreaks to come anywhere? But here's the thing. So keep in mind that people who are listening, when you see a herpes outbreak, right? If you see a herpes outbreak in your genitals, and you see a herpes outbreak on your ass, your buttocks, or in your butt crack, or wherever you're seeing your herpes outbreak, that outbreak is caused by an infection that previously happened, whether it was just recent or it happened way before. That virus needs to be introduced to that area. So somebody who gets a cold sore on their lip, it was introduced in that area. If you get a herpes outbreak on your shoulder, 9 times out of 10, maybe you were biting each other and you guys were having some crazy ass fun and you were enjoying yourself and somebody got a little crazy. People tend to forget, like, while you're having sex, I don't know about you, but when I have sex, I'm not just going in and out, I'm doing other stuff.
okay.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So you got your hands in different places, you're using your mouth, you're rubbing up on each other, you're doing all kinds of crazy shit. Hey, maybe you're tying each other up and spanking each other. Whatever it is,
Yeah.
if you have a viral amount somewhere on your body and it's introduced to another person's body in that area, yeah, you could introduce it to that area, and that's probably what amount somewhere on your body and it's introduced to another person's body in that area. Yeah, you could introduce it to that area, and that's probably why you're seeing
I'll be right back, Rich.
is. Go ahead. I don't know if I would say that. I guess normal is it's a relative type of word if you really wanted to go that way. Um, I guess normal would kind of really depend on what was normal for you, honestly. What was the other one? My son was born with herpes on his head, but he had another outbreak on his arm a year later. So, um, if you're talking about herpes infections that are neonates, which means neonatal, which is being born and having the virus introduced, which is very dangerous. Um, it's unfortunate. Many infants do not survive. My friend Brianna, we were just talking about before, her son did not survive because infants do not have a fully functioning immune system. And herpes to someone who doesn't have an immune system can really cause a lot of damage. So it's possible that that virus it wasn't isolated to just that one nerve area where it was introduced, and it made its way through the nervous system through his arm because the immune system was not blocking it. But it's something that doesn't happen quite often. I'm sorry that happened to your son, and hopefully he won't have to deal with that type of thing for a long time. But yeah, having the virus introduced to you between birth and the first 2 years can be very detrimental.
What I miss?
Oh, somebody was talking about her infant getting herpes.
Okay. I'm sorry that happened to you too. I
Yeah,
was so freaked out. My son has he has this. It doesn't look. It's like a bump, but it's not open. It's kind of like here on his lips since birth.
it could just be a fat deposit in the lips.
Yeah, I used to always think it was herpes. So I'm like, is it my son has herpes? Can you
Every
test
little
the
thing.
herpes? Can you test the area? Da, 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 da. He doesn't have herpes, but for like the first 2-3 years of his life, I used to always freak out about it because I just thought in my heart of hearts that I gave my son herpes, and he don't. It is a fat deposit. You called it out.
Right.
That he was born with that just never goes away, and it stays there. And it doesn't look like herpes. It looks a part of his lip. You really got to look hard. But with me freaking out
Yeah.
and me knowing that I had herpes and there was a possibility I could have gave it to my son, I blew it out of proportion.
Yep.
And it just goes to show how much our mind controls a lot of things in our lives. If you change your mind about
Yep.
something, your life can change significantly. Um, the herpes stigma, I feel like it's a choice. Um, Sometimes that the blanket of victimhood feels safe and it feels comfortable and it's easy to sit in because then you get to blame herpes for everything in your life that might not be right. But you can
Right.
choose to take your power back and say, let me let my herpes show me everything in my life that may not be right so that I can change it and change my narrative. Herpes has a tendency of bringing everything to the surface. So if you're really feeling the weight of the stigma, I suggest that you write down exactly what you're feeling so that you can learn the areas that you need to work on. It's never your herpes, you guys. It's shit you literally decided to ignore before the herpes, and now that you have herpes, you can't ignore it anymore.
Yes. See that? That's it's something that cannot be ignored. Yeah,
Yes.
and
Ooh,
that's the part when people hear that they're like, "This sucks. I don't want it," and you're in denial, and you never get out of the stages of grief.
yeah.
You just never get out of it. I have a friend. who she's doing therapy,
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't seem to be working, and she has become, not that this is anything against her or what she's thinking, but she has become comfortable in that situation. You become comfortable in that pain, and it's the narrative that you keep saying to yourself. You're like, oh, this sucks, oh, this is terrible, oh, I don't know what to do. And if you keep saying that crap to yourself,
You believe it.
you start believing it. Yeah,
Put
absolutely.
yourself in a loop.
And I'm kind of hoping, yeah, she's absolutely stuck in that
Yeah.
loop. And nobody is, no, I don't think anybody can avoid that. I mean, some people get out of it,
Yeah.
some people figure it out sooner than later, and some people just have that attitude to be able to do
Yeah.
so. I had been stuck in that loop for years.
Mm-hmm.
For years. I mean, it wasn't until I got the vaccine in 2016 that I actually had the balls to talk about it. I mean, you ladies, yeah, obviously, vagina is much stronger than balls, because some of you ladies are like, oh, I have this. Oh, I'm going to start talking about it right away.
Oh,
I never,
I wasn't right away.
as a man, oh, you
I was
weren't?
not
Oh,
right
okay.
away. That wasn't me.
But
Amber, yes.
there are some,
Amber, yes.
yeah, there are some women that are just like, no, I don't care.
Yeah.
And it's pretty admirable. I mean, women have this ability to capture the commitment of something, especially if it's something that's important to them. And guys, we really don't have that much of that commitment.
Mm-hmm.
I just got to a point where I don't give a shit anymore. I don't care what people think, which is what I wish for most people, because once you get to that point, there's nothing that anybody can say that will bother you, which is hysterical.
That part. And then another thing with getting to that point is you realize that just America alone is like a mental asylum of people, just zombies walking everywhere. Just a bunch of zombies because we rely so much on what other people think of us that you can never show up as your authentic self because you're living your life literally for other people. Herpes stigma,
What a waste of time.
it's a waste of time. The herpes stigma is validation. You are seeking validation. That is what you're feeling. From the time that you find out you have herpes and you're in there with your physician, let's just say it's your physician that's telling you right now in the room. The only two people that know is you and your physician, and yet you feel the weight of the herpes stigma. The only thing that's changed in your life is your knowing. So that means if you feel the herpes stigma, it's because it's everything that you've already believed. And then you leave the doctor's office and your subconscious is going to work for you. It's really going to work for you when you think it's not working for you. And humans love to be right. It's going to look for everything in life that's going to prove your thoughts about your herpes right. And then you're going to make that stigma your reality. You're embracing it. You're accepting it. You're speaking it into your life. This is how you show up. Herpes ruined my life. That will be your narrative if you continue to tell yourself that.
Yeah, you got to stop saying that. Yeah, the other thing too, we tend to forget to be grateful for some of the things that we have, but you're so stuck in that loop.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, oh, this sucks, and all this and that, and I'm like, well, wait a second. I got a decent life. I got a nice place to live. I'm doing all these things. Why can't I just be more grateful for that?
Yep. Yep.
So it's definitely a journey, and a lot of people struggle with that.
Mm-hmm.
But which leads me to my one point is with the weekend. The Herpes Could Never
Yes,
weekend.
the Herpes Could Never virtual retreat, which is I'm so excited that we're having because we have so many different point of views and everybody on the retreat is over a dozen healers has herpes. I hear a lot of people in the community say, I want to go to therapy, but my therapist doesn't understand because my therapist doesn't have herpes. Well, we have a therapist a part of the retreat, and she has herpes. We have a physician a part of the retreat, and she has herpes. Yes, you can hear it out my mouth and Rich's mouth, but for some reason, when y'all hear it out the doctor's mouth, you believe it more. So we made sure the doctor will be there. We also have a holistic nutritionist that's going to be a part of the retreat. So those of you who are saying, I don't want to take suppression medication anymore, I want to figure out other ways that I can live my life with herpes, then you might want to show up to retreat to go see the only nutritionist when she shows up.
Oh, Adrian. Yeah.
This is a 3-day retreat, July 16th to
16th,
the 19th,
17th.
17th,
Yep.
and 18th. 16th, 17th, and 18th. And we are currently having a 72-hour flash sale. If you haven't secured your seat for the retreat, now is the time to invest in your healing. You spend $50 easily on a meal at at a restaurant with Bay. You spend $50 easily on some shoes. Why not on a 3-day event that's going to help you better your life with your herpes? You're going to learn about herpes. You're going to learn about how to break the stigma in your life, how we've broken the stigma in our life. Some of us, it took us years. It took me years to break the stigma in my life. We have our breath worker, Euphoria. It took her 10 years to break the stigma in her life. And we're literally trying to shorten that time period for you all. Most of us, when we found out we had herpes, we didn't have this. I was dying. I'm searching everywhere for information. All I have is WebMDs and these scary ass photos. So,
Yep.
if you haven't secured your seat and you want to know how, go to the link in my bio, www.herpesconnector.com. Rich will be at the retreat as well, speaking. He's bringing the facts.
I think I'm going to be talking. I think it's Friday. Friday at 7 p.m.
7.
I'm going to be going through my thesis on the stigma. It's actually some of it's a great deal of it's going to be a lot from my book and the new book, which I'm actually working on. So I'm going to be discussing the stigma, its history, its foundation, and its applications. And then I believe Saturday, I got to check the time again. Okay. I think it's 3 to 3:30. I'll be talking about Herpes 101, the facts. So some of the facts that we talked about, I'm going to be talking about, and just kind of giving people a brief overview of some of the things that they never really thought of, or they didn't even know about herpes. Like I kind of dropped a few bombs before about 10 or 15 minutes ago talking with you.
You did. I'm gonna download this whole live because this live was packed with information. So I'm gonna download the live. I know how to do that part. I just don't know how to bring people on live with me.
I think it's on your settings that you have to allow. I gotta look. Okay. I gotta look.
Okay.
But there's, I'm still kind of, TikTok's a little funny.
Yeah, TikTok is very funny. TikTok has banned me from the Creator Fund. I submitted an appeal. They told me I've been banned. Then I submitted another appeal last week. It's because a lot of people report my content. They think I'm promoting getting an STD versus spreading awareness. So TikTok just sees the report. They don't see how many of the reports they appealed and actually put my videos back in. So they reviewed it again, and I get back on the Creator Fund in September. So they even suspended me for 6 months. Yeah.
What?
TikTok has been doing some funny things, okay? Because I see a lot of things on TikTok slide. For one, pedophilia. So, I don't understand how spreading awareness about STDs and women having 13 orgasms is a bad thing.
I literally saw. I started. I have no shame. I like watching twerking videos. I don't care. So there was a woman. She was doing her little dance and she was doing some twerking videos, and I was like, wow. I mean, if I tried that, I think I'd break my back. But then TikTok started on your For You page started sending me just a shitload of twerking videos. I'm like, okay, this is getting out of control. I'm like, why can't you send me other herpes advocates and some other, I like cars, I like motorcycles. No, TikTok, we're not going to send you any of that. We're just going to send you a bunch of ass. That's all we're going to send you. I'm like, seriously?
Seriously, TikTok? Oh, man. We have someone. Can herpes prevent you from having children? No, herpes cannot prevent you from having children. All right. Well, Rich, I have to prepare for a call, and I want to make sure I got my lunch hour. I'm so happy you caught this live with me. This was such a great live. We had a lot of people in attendance. I can't wait to see the analytics after this live. If you haven't secured your seat for this retreat that we have in July, go ahead and select the link in my bio or go to www.herpescanever.com. And when you're coming off this live, go ahead and give Rich a follow. He is also a herpes advocate and he's been in this for 30 years. So go ahead and follow him.
Follow my cat.
Oh, hey, Curtis. All right, Rich. Have a good day.
Thanks. Take care.